In a world of wealth and power, Damien Cole lives in a luxurious penthouse, surrounded by the elite. He's cold, distant, and never lets anyone get too close. Then there's Amara, a humble, hardworking woman who dreams of a better life for her sick mother. She doesn't belong in this rich world, but fate has other plans. Amara finds herself at Damien's party, dressed simply. She feels out of place, while Damien watches her quietly, intrigued by her innocence. The rich guests ignore Amara, judging her for her modest appearance. She's just a background figure in their glamorous world. But Damien notices her. There's something about her purity that stands out. He's drawn to her, even though he's not used to feeling anything. What starts as a brief, innocent interaction turns into a passionate night, one that Amara will never forget. But the morning after, she's gone, leaving Damien alone with his thoughts. Back in her normal life, Amara faces rumors and harsh judgments. People say she used Damien for money, but the truth is, she didn't want his wealth. She wanted help. For her mother, Damien, unable to forget her, starts looking for answers. He discovers the truth about her life and regrets the way he treated her. Damien is determined to make things right. But will Amara forgive him? Can they move past the mistakes of the past and build something real? Keep watching to see what happens next in this emotional journey of love and redemption.
But if it is your first time hers, then don't forget to like and subscribe for more amazing stories. Let's get started.
The clinking of cutlery and the echo of soft jazz faded behind Amara as she tied her apron tighter and stepped out into the bitter evening air. Her shoes were worn at the heel, and her purse, no heavier than a folded napkin, carried only her ID and a crumpled $5 note. The manager's voice still rang in her ears. "We're letting you go, Amara. Business is slow." She didn't cry. Amara had never allowed herself the luxury of tears. Not when her father walked out. Not when her mother fell ill. Not even when she dropped out of university because of the bills. She was a fighter, modest, quiet, forged in the heat of life's cruelty. She walked the dim streets of the city, neon lights reflecting off puddles like shattered dreams. As she rounded the corner toward the bus stop, a sleek black car pulled up beside her. The window lowered, revealing a woman in an elegant crimson coat with lips to match. "You're Amara, right?" she asked, her voice smooth like silk sliding over glass. Amara nodded slowly, unsure. "My boss saw you once at the Grand Lounge. He's interested." "Just one night. He'll pay well." Amara blinked, stunned. Her instinct screamed no. Her pride burned. But her mother's wheezing cough echoed in her mind. The unpaid hospital billed $3,000 was due in 2 days. There was no one left to ask for help. The woman handed her a business card and whispered, "The amount. It's more than enough to cover the bill." That night, Amara sat on her worn-out bed, clutching the card. Her heart was pounding, torn between dignity and desperation. She wasn't that kind of girl. She never had been. But life, cold and unyielding, had backed her into a corner. She arrived at the penthouse at 10 p.m., hair brushed, nerves coiled, heart breaking silently beneath a borrowed dress. She rang the bell. The door opened. There he was, Damien Cole, tall, tailored, and terrifyingly handsome. A billionaire wrapped in ice, eyes like winter storms. He said nothing, just stared. And somehow, that silence was louder than anything she'd ever heard. She stepped inside, not for pleasure, not for thrill, but for survival. And behind her, the door closed with a soft click that sounded eerily like the end of innocence. The penthouse smelled of cedarwood and money, clean, expensive, untouchable. Amara stepped in, her palms clammy against the thin fabric of her dress. Every inch of the space screamed exclusivity. Marble floors, a glass staircase that spiraled like an art piece, and walls adorned with black and white photography that probably cost more than her rent for a year. And there he was, Damien Cole, a man who had everything and trusted no one. He stood at the end of the grand hallway wearing A navy silk shirt unbuttoned at the collar, his sharp jawline casting a shadow under the dim chandelier. His gaze swept over her, unreadable, detached. It wasn't lust or admiration, it was curiosity, the kind that dissected, judged, calculated. "You're not what I expected," he said finally, his voice smooth but clipped, cold. Amara's throat tightened. "Neither are you." He raised an eyebrow at her reply. A flicker of amusement, brief, then gone. Dinner was silent. He ate little. She barely touched her plate. He didn't ask her about her life. He didn't tell her anything about his. The silence wasn't empty, it was full of things unsaid. She could feel his eyes on her when she wasn't looking, not with hunger, but with a strange interest. Like she was a puzzle that didn't fit after the last glass of wine. He walked to the window, overlooking the glittering cityscape, hands in his pockets. "You can back out. I won't stop you." She hesitated. Her heart thundered against her ribs. "I'm here, aren't I?" Their eyes met in the reflection of the glass, hers filled with fear she wouldn't voice. His masked by a fortress built over years of control. The night unfolded not as expected. No dominance, no cold transactions. He was slow, careful surprisingly. Gentle Amara lay still afterwards, staring at the high ceiling, trying to make sense of the fact that it hadn't felt like a deal. It had felt ... human. Damien, lying beside her, stared at the same ceiling, his face unreadable. But when she fell asleep, curled into herself like she was still trying to hide. He turned to watch her in the silence. Something stirred. He didn't understand it, and he hated things he couldn't control, so when morning came and she was gone without a note, without asking for more, he didn't chase her. But he held on to the necklace she left behind, like it burned through his palm. The first blush of morning spilled through the penthouse windows like liquid gold. Amara sat at the edge of the bed, the silk sheets barely covering her. Her back to the sleeping man behind her, Damien Cole. The name alone echoed like thunder in her mind. She had done what she swore she never would. Not just because of the act itself, but because of how it had made her feel. Safe, seen, cherished, for a moment, and now she hated herself for letting it matter. She dressed in silence. Fingers trembling as she zipped up the borrowed dress. She left the money neatly folded and untouched on the counter where the woman in red had promised it would be. Her dignity, she told herself, had already been spent. As she reached the elevator, she realized her necklace, her late father's gift, a small silver cross, was missing. Her breath caught, but she didn't have the strength to go back. Not after that night. Not after seeing the look in Damien's eyes, so carefully guarded. Like even tenderness was a calculated risk. She stepped into the morning sun. The city now cold in a different way. Amara took the money to the hospital. That same day, her mother was asleep, a breathing tube whispering between each labored breath. When the nurse handed her the cleared invoice, Amara felt something crack open in her chest. A strange relief mixed with the ache of everything she had just given up. At least now her mother could live, even if she felt a part of her had quietly died. Meanwhile, back in the penthouse, Damien stirred. He woke to the silence of an empty bed, the faint scent of vanilla and something floral lingering in the air. He glanced at the untouched pillow beside him. No note. No goodbye, just gone. But when he walked into the bathroom, he found it. A delicate silver necklace hanging off the edge of the sink, as if left behind by accident or maybe fate. He held it between his fingers, examining the small engraved cross. Simple, pure, out of place in his world of wealth and walls, and for reasons he couldn't explain. He didn't toss it aside. He slipped it into his pocket, and for the first time in years, Damien Cole couldn't stop thinking about someone who had already walked away. Damien Cole sat behind the smoked glass of his office, the skyline stretching endlessly beyond him. Yet his mind refused to focus on the deal his assistant was summarizing or the spreadsheets blinking on his laptop. He had reviewed the same proposal 3 times. but couldn't recall a word. All he could see was her dot Amara. The way her eyes had avoided his after their night together. The way she left silently, like she didn't matter. Like he didn't matter. It was absurd. He'd had women leave before. He usually preferred it that way. But something about her innocence, her quiet strength, the way she trembled but stood tall, it stayed with him. And that damn necklace. He pulled it from his pocket again, brushing his thumb over the tiny silver cross. "Find her," he said, abruptly to Marcus, his personal investigator. Name's Amara. Mid-20s, she worked at the Grand Lounge until recently. No last name, just find her. Marcus raised a brow. "Is she in trouble?" "No," Damien said, his voice colder than intended. "I just want to talk." Cross town, Amara stepped off the city bus, her worn shoes hitting the dusty pavement. Of the neighborhood she had called home all her life. The buildings were close, the gossip even closer. She kept her head down, hoping to melt into the background like she always had. But today there were whispers, loud ones. "Did you hear? She slept with a billionaire for cash. I heard he gave her thousands, just for one night. No wonder she's strutting around here like she's somebody." She froze mid-step. Her chest tightened as laughter echoed behind her. Two women she'd grown up with looked away when she passed. Her old coworker from the diner crossed the street instead of saying hello. Amara felt her cheeks burn. Not from shame, but from betrayal. She had done what she had to do. For her mother. For survival. Yet in the eyes of the world she was no longer a girl trying to stay afloat. She was a scandal at home. Her mother noticed the silence. "You okay, baby?" Amara smiled faintly. "I'm fine, Mama. Just tired." But that night, while washing dishes with trembling hands, she wondered if she'd ever be able to reclaim her life, or if the rumors would bury her before. She had a chance to bloom, and somewhere far above the noise, Damien Cole stared out at the city, unaware that his search for her might stir up a storm neither of them were ready for. Amara had just stepped out to sweep the tiny porch of their rented apartment when the black car pulled up. It didn't belong. Not in this neighborhood of rusted fences and peeling paint. Not among the murmurs of gossip that still lingered in. The air-like smog. The door opened, and Damien Cole stepped out, dressed in a black tailored suit like he had walked straight out of another world, one where power obeyed his every command. She froze. Broom in hand, heart hammering in her chest. "What are you doing here?" she asked, voice taut. "I found you," he said simply. "You left your necklace." Her fingers touched the hollow of her throat instinctively. Empty. "That's all?" "No," he replied, his eyes narrowing. "I need your help. It's complicated." She crossed her arms, wary. "Go on." Damien looked around at the peeling paint of the front steps, the window cracked from the inside. "I'm being hounded by someone I should have cut ties with years ago, Giselle. My ex-fiancé. Our families are intertwined, and she thinks she still has a claim on me." Amara's brows lifted. "And what does that have to do with me?" "I need a fake fiancé," he said bluntly. "It's long enough to get Giselle out of the picture. She thrives on control, and nothing will shake her more than seeing me with someone else. Someone real, but unexpected." Amara blinked. "So, you want me to pretend to be in love with you?" "Yes," she scoffed, turning toward the door. "You must be insane. I'll pay for your full education," he added quickly. "Any school, any course. And enough money to take care of your mother comfortably." That made her stop. "I don't want your pity," she muttered. "It's not pity. It's business." The words settled between them like fog. Business, not. Affection, not attachment. And for some reason, that made it easier to consider. She turned back, eyes serious. "Fine, I'll do it. But on one condition. I'm listening. No touching, no real feelings. No crossing lines," she said. "This stays an arrangement. Strictly professional." Damien's lips curved, almost amused. "Emotions are messy. I don't do them." They shook hands, and just like that. Two strangers who had shared one night now stood at the beginning of a far more dangerous game. One where hearts weren't supposed to be involved, but hearts never play by the rules. Amara felt like she was dreaming, except the dream was too cold. It's too sharp around the edges to be real. The gown clung to her figure like it was made for her. Diamonds sparkled around her neck. The private jet hummed softly beneath her. Across from her, Damien scrolled through his phone as if they weren't soaring above the clouds on the way to an elite charity gala. She glanced out the window, trying to suppress the swirl of emotions inside her. This wasn't her world. It never had been. And despite the designer heels and flawless makeup, she felt like an imposter walking through a palace built of glass, where one wrong step could shatter everything. They arrived to flashing cameras, and a sea of reporters screaming Damien's name. "Smile," he whispered, placing a light hand on her back. She did. She played the part. His hand never lingered too long. His eyes never softened. But to the world, they were a golden couple, mysterious, perfect, in love. Inside the ballroom, chandeliers sparkled like a sky full of stars. Waiters served champagne. In crystal flutes, Amara moved through the crowd beside Damien. Every eye fixed on her dot, and then she saw her dot, Giselle, blonde, breathtaking and icy. Dressed in a blood-red gown that clung to her like sin, she walked up to them with the confidence of someone who had never been told no. Well, Damien, I didn't realize we were inviting the help to these things now." Mara stiffened. But Damien answered coolly, "Be nice, Giselle. Jealousy doesn't suit you." Giselle's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, sweetheart," she said to Amara, "enjoy it while it lasts." "Men like Damien always get bored." Amara smiled back, her voice calm. "Then I guess you're living proof of that." The flash of fury in Giselle's eyes was brief but telling. Later that night, as Amara changed out of the gown in her guest suite in Damien's penthouse, she leaned against the wall and exhaled shakily. She hated that her heart beat faster. Every time Damien looked at her, hated that. Beneath his emotional distance, she wondered what he was really thinking. And she hated how easy it was to pretend to be his fiancé. Because sometimes she forgot it wasn't real. Meanwhile, across the city, Giselle stood in her luxury condo, sipping wine with a dangerous smirk. "She thinks she's clever," she muttered to herself. "But I'll ruin her. No one replaces me." She picked up her phone and dialed a number. "Dig into her," she ordered. "Find her past, her weaknesses. I want to destroy everything she thinks she's building with Damien." The real game had just begun, and Amara didn't even know the rules. The Med-IR Foundation Gala was the highlight of the season, an exclusive event attended by royalty, CEOs, and celebrities. And somehow Amara stood in the center of it all, wearing a custom silver gown that shimmered with every step she took. Damien stood beside her, his arm linked loosely with hers, his usual detached expression in place. But his grip tonight was just a little firmer, his gaze lingering on her just a little longer. Amara felt it. The shift. Every time she laughed at someone's joke or spoke confidently about a cause she believed in. She caught Damien watching her, not just observing, but seeing her, and it shook him. She wasn't just a girl from the other side of town. Anymore, she was radiant, strong, unapologetically real in a world built on masks. Damien didn't like complications. He didn't believe in feelings. But tonight, Amara's warmth was melting the armor he'd built over years of emotional detachment. Then came the unexpected moment. Across the ballroom, Giselle approached with two other socialites, her eyes locked on them like a predator ready to pounce. Damien caught sight of her and turned to Amara with sudden urgency. "Giselle's watching," he said under his breath. "It's time to play our part." Before she could respond, his hand slipped to her waist and he pulled her close, and then he kissed. Her dot, it was supposed to be for show, a convincing act, to silence doubt. But it wasn't just convincing, it was consuming. Amara's heart skipped as his lips brushed hers. Firm yet tender, deliberate but not forced. The world seemed to vanish, no cameras, no whispers, no X's. just the heat of his touch and the pounding of her heart. When he finally pulled away, her breath caught in her throat. He didn't say a word, just gave a faint nod and turned to address another guest as if nothing had happened. But something had, that night. In the quiet of the penthouse, Amara stood at the window, arms wrapped around herself. What was that kiss? A performance? Or something real? She couldn't stop replaying it in her mind, how he'd looked at her right before. How his hand lingered at the small of her back. How her body responded in ways she hadn't expected. Damien, in the next room, was no better. He paced his office. Irritated with himself, it was just a kiss. Part of the plan, that's all. But it had felt different. Dangerous, he didn't do different. Amara touched her lips, still warm from his. She'd promised no emotions, but promises were harder to keep. When the heart started to betray you, and hers just had. The tabloids had a field day. Amara's name was splashed across every front page, her face caught in a photo from the gala. A gleaming diamond necklace around her neck, with the bold headline, "Broke Virgin Girl Turns Billionaire's Mistressy. One Night Stand to Remember." The words stung like a slap across her face. She stared at the newspaper on the kitchen table, her fingers trembling. It was as if the ground had fallen out from under her. No one could understand the truth. No one would. It was all a lie, cruel, manipulated version of events. A carefully orchestrated plan, and Giselle had been the mastermind. Her phone buzzed, relentlessly with messages. Friends who had never asked her a thing about her life now turned on her, asking if it was true. Neighbors gossiped when she walked out of her apartment. Their whispers were thick with judgment. The humiliation was unbearable. Her mother, who had just begun to recover from her surgery, watched in horror as the news spread like wildfire. Amara had promised to give her peace of mind, but now her world was a storm of shame. Then there was Damien, the man who had made this all possible. The man who had kissed her and made her believe for a moment that this wasn't just business. Amara hadn't expected him to step into her world as a knight in shining armor. But she had at least expected something, an apology, an acknowledgement of the truth. Instead, Damien did nothing. He'd seen the tabloids. He'd heard the whispers. But he hadn't come to her side. Not once. Not until the confrontation. Giselle had called him that evening, knowing she'd won. Her voice was sweet, sickly sweet, as she asked about their agreement. It's pretending innocence. "Damien, I'm so sorry. I never meant for things to get so out of hand. But now the world knows the truth, and I think Amara should be grateful to me for giving her this chance at fame, don't you?" Damien's anger boiled, but he didn't show it. He knew exactly where Giselle's games were heading. She was never going to let him go. She was going to use Amara as a pawn, just like she always had. He found Giselle in his private office, casually flipping through documents. As though she hadn't just ruined Amara's life. "You did this," Damien said, his voice low, dangerous. "You leaked it to the press." Giselle shrugged, unfazed. She was always going to be a distraction. "I didn't want her taking what's mine." Damien's pulse raced. He wanted to scream, to hurt her the way she'd hurt Amara. But his words froze, because despite the betrayal, despite the anger that roiled inside him, he couldn't admit it, couldn't say the words he didn't even want to acknowledge. Instead of defending Amara, he turned away, his voice cold and distant. "I'll handle this." And so he did. He called the public relations team. He posted an official statement, sterile, emotionless, denying the claims. But the damage was already done. Amara was still alone in the storm, and no one seemed to care. Not even Damien. Not really. Amara stood in front of the mirror, the reflection staring back at her unrecognizable. The woman who had walked into Damien's world full of hope and uncertainty was gone, replaced by someone scarred, disillusioned, and exhausted. Her phone buzzed again, another message from Damien. "We need to talk." She stared at the screen for a long moment, her fingers hovering over the keys. But she already knew the truth. She couldn't keep pretending to the arrangement. This facade of a life was no longer just hurting her. It was suffocating her. She had believed she could control her emotions, but each day with Damien was a reminder of how deep her feelings ran. She couldn't be a pawn anymore. She couldn't keep sacrificing pieces of herself for the sake of a man who hadn't fought for her when it mattered most. With one last glance at her luxurious surroundings, Amara walked out of the penthouse. Her heels clicked sharply on the marble floor as she made her way to the elevator. Every step was a painful one, each one taking her further away from Damien and from the world she had come to wish would be hers. Damien found her waiting by the door the next day, her bags packed and her back straight. "You're leaving?" he asked, his voice a mixture of disbelief and anger. Amara held his gaze, trying to keep the tears at bay. "I can't stay, Damien. Not like this. Not when I'm being used as a distraction. I came into this arrangement with eyes wide open, but the truth is this isn't me, and it's not you either." He stood frozen for a moment, words failing him. He reached out as if to stop her, but then he let his hand fall. "Amara." She shook her head, the pain in her chest unbearable. "I've lost myself in this world, and I'm done pretending." The silence hung between them like 1,000 unsaid words. Amara turned and walked away without looking back. The click of the door closing was final. It was over. Amara spent the next few days at her small apartment sorting through what remained of her shattered confidence. The tabloids still mocked her, but this time she didn't care. She wasn't going to hide or run anymore. She took the money she had earned honestly and applied to several universities. For the first time in what felt like forever, she was choosing herself. Amara had always dreamed of getting an education, of building a future for herself, not one dictated by a man's world or a media circus. She had more to offer than her past or her mistakes. Meanwhile, Damien sat in his penthouse, a glass of whiskey in hand, staring out the window at the city that felt too small for him now. He had lost her, and for the first time, he felt the weight of his own emotions, something he had long ignored. She had walked away. But what he hadn't realized until it was too late was how much he had come to care for her. Her innocence, her strength, her refusal to be anyone but herself. She wasn't just a distraction. She was the one thing in his life that had been real. But it was too late now. The first thing Damien did after Amara left was to break his ties with Giselle. It was messy, the kind of chaos that he was used to. Giselle's rage, her accusations, her refusal to let go of a man she believed she still controlled. But Damien wasn't listening anymore. He was done. "Giselle," he said in a cold, unyielding tone, "this is over. I'm cutting all ties. Don't contact me again." Her shrill voice echoed on the other end of the line, but he didn't let her words penetrate. His heart was no longer tethered to her manipulative grip. He had been living in a cocoon of his own creation, using his wealth and power as barriers to keep others at a distance. But Amara had shattered that wall, and now all he wanted was to make things right. Damien knew that breaking things off with Giselle was only the first step. The second step was harder. He had to find Amara, to apologize, and to show her he wasn't the man she thought him to be. But finding her proved to be difficult. She had vanished from the public eye, and though his private investigator had searched, Amara remained elusive, hiding from the world as though trying to erase her existence from the tabloids. So Damien did what he knew best. He took action, but quietly. He made anonymous donations to Amara's community, providing scholarships to young students and funding programs to improve local health care. It wasn't much, but it was something. He knew her mother's treatment had been difficult, so he made sure that her medical bills were paid in full again, under an anonymous name. His fingers hovered over the donation confirmation page, a small smile playing at the corners of his lips. Perhaps Amara would never know who had helped her, but at least he could feel some sense of redemption. And maybe, just maybe, the universe would give him another chance. As time passed, Damien found himself slipping into a familiar isolation, one he had long avoided. The world around him, despite all the money and success, felt hollow. Without Amara, his life felt meaningless, like a puzzle missing its most important piece. He needed to understand why he had become this way, cold, distant, incapable of expressing anything but anger and frustration. He sat alone in his office late one evening, staring at the dark skyline. A part of him wanted to pretend that he was fine, that he had everything under control, but deep down, he knew he was still broken. And so, for the first time in years, Damien opened up to himself. He thought about his past, about the cold, uncaring family who had used him for his wealth and status. He remembered his father's harsh words and his mother's silence. They had never loved him, never showed him what it meant to truly care for someone. I had raised him to be self-sufficient, emotionally numb, and detached. Love had always been something he avoided, something that made him vulnerable. He could see it now, the reason for his reluctance to open up to anyone, including Amara. He had been afraid of feeling, afraid of being hurt. But now, he wasn't. Sure, if he could live another day in the numbness he had built around himself, he had to fix this. He had to find Amara and tell her everything. Amara stood at the podium, her heart pounding in her chest as she accepted the scholarship award in front of a crowd of strangers, friends, and local dignitaries. The applause felt distant, muffled by the swirling thoughts in her mind. She had worked hard for this moment, sacrificing so much to get to this point. The money from the donations had helped pay for her schooling, her mother's treatment, and allowed her to stand here, a small symbol of hope in her community. Yet, as she looked at the audience, there was one face she had not expected to see: Damien. Cole, standing at the back of the room, his piercing gaze fixed solely on her. Her heart skipped a beat. What was he doing here? Damien's presence was like an electric shock, jolting through her veins. He stood tall, dressed in a black suit that seemed too refined, too perfect for a setting like this. And yet, as she met his eyes, there was something different about him: vulnerable, raw, and utterly determined. Amara's hands trembled as she stepped off the stage, the ceremony now a blur of voices and camera flashes. She tried to keep her composure, but her pulse raced as Damien made his way toward her. Cutting through the crowd with an air of authority and purpose, "Amara," he said, his voice low, yet somehow carrying through the chaos of the event. She froze. The world seemed to stand still for a moment as she met his eyes again. She had expected to feel anger, resentment, or perhaps bitterness. But instead, what she saw was someone who had shed the cold armor he had worn so well, someone who had come to confront the past. "I owe you everything," he began, his voice breaking slightly. "I know I hurt you, and I have no excuse for what I did. But I need you to know the truth." Amara swallowed hard, her throat tightening. "Damien, this isn't—" "No," he interrupted gently. "Let me finish. I've been searching for you, and I know that doesn't fix anything, okay? But I need you to understand." He paused, taking a deep breath, as though gathering the courage to speak the words that had been trapped inside him for so long. "I never slept with anyone else after you. Not one woman. You were the only one, and I've never forgotten you." Amara's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to say something, anything, but her mind was a whirl of conflicting emotions. All the pain, the humiliation, the anger, everything she had tried to bury was rushing to the surface. Damien reached into his pocket and pulled out the necklace she had left behind that fateful morning. "You left this at my place. I never wanted to forget that night. I never wanted to forget you." Her eyes filled with tears. She looked at the necklace, then at him, really looked at him, and for the first time she saw the vulnerability in his eyes. He wasn't the same man who had walked away from her. He had changed. "I'm sorry, Amara," he whispered. I was afraid of what I felt for you. I didn't know how to deal with it." Tears streamed down Amara's face, not from anger or hurt, but from the overwhelming weight of everything she had been through. She was tired of being strong, tired of pretending. In this moment, it all came crashing down. She had been so afraid. Of her own feelings, too. But seeing him here now, confessing his truth, she couldn't hold it in any longer. "I don't know what to say," she whispered, her voice trembling. Damien gently placed the necklace in her hands, his fingers brushing against hers. "Say that you'll let me try to make things right. Say that you'll let me love you, Amara. I can't undo the past, but I want to build something better with you. I know I don't deserve it, but I need you to know how much you mean to me." Amara's sobs shook her body, and for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to feel it all, the hurt, the hope, and the possibility of healing. She didn't answer him right away. But as she held the necklace in her hands, feeling the weight of his words settle into her heart, she knew that she wasn't quite ready to let go of the possibility that love, for both of them, could still find a way. The air was cool, the kind of calm that only came in the quiet hours of the night, when the world had settled into its own rhythm. Amara and Damien stood on the balcony of his private estate, the soft glow of the city lights below illuminating the peaceful silence between them. It had been weeks since their emotional reunion, and each day had brought them closer, not through grand gestures or extravagant displays, but through simple, honest moments shared between them. Damien had changed. No longer the cold, emotionally distant man she had once known. He had slowly allowed her to see the true person beneath the wealth and the walls he had built. And Amara had changed too. She had learned to trust again, not just in Damien, but in herself, in her own worth. They had rebuilt their relationship, piece by piece. No contracts or lies, just truth, vulnerability, and slow, steady love. It wasn't always easy. There were moments when old wounds resurfaced, moments when the fear of being hurt again threatened to pull them apart. But each time, they faced it together. They learned to speak openly, to be patient, to heal. Damien, standing beside her now, reached for her hand, his fingers brushing against hers. There was no grand ceremony, no lavish rings, just the quiet intimacy of a shared moment. It was enough, more than enough. "I don't have much to give you, Amara," Damien said, his voice softer than she had ever heard it, "except my heart and the promise that I'll never take it for granted again. I've been a fool, running from what I knew I wanted all along. But I'm here now. I'm not perfect, but I want to spend every day trying to be." Amara turned to look at him, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never seen him like this, so pine, unguarded, and truly vulnerable. The walls he had spent years building had crumbled, and in their place was something real, something lasting. "I know I don't deserve you," Damien continued, his eyes never leaving hers. "But I'm asking. Amara, will you marry me? Not because I'm rich, not because it's expected, but because I love you. Because I can't imagine a future without you in it." Amara's breath caught in her throat. The man before her was not the same person who had walked away all those months ago. He wasn't offering her security or wealth. He was offering her his heart. She could see it in his eyes, the raw sincerity that had taken so long to uncover. He had become someone she could trust, someone who valued her for who she was, not for the circumstances of their first meeting. With a soft, tender smile, Amara placed her hand over his. "Yes, Damien," she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. "I'll marry you because you changed, because you've shown me that love can grow, that it's never too late to start again." Damien's face softened with relief, his hand gently cupping her cheek as he leaned in. Their lips met in a kiss that spoke more than words ever could. It was a kiss of forgiveness, of understanding, of a future built not on perfection, but on a deep, unwavering commitment to each other. As they pulled back, Damien smiled, his eyes glistening with emotion. "I've spent so long searching for "The wrong things," he said softly. "But I finally found what I was meant to have all along." They stood there under the stars, the world quiet around them. No secrets, no shame, just love. And as Amara rested her head on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart, she knew this was just the beginning. A beginning where they would walk together, side by side, not as two broken people, but as two souls bound by a love that had been tested, but had never wavered.